we got to go all around the SEC. It's a big weekend in the SEC because Arkansas plays Georgia. It's a big weekend in the SEC because Ole Miss plays Bama. But we already broke those games down. If you want to see those picks, they are available both in podcast form and on the YouTube channel. But let's talk about some of these other games coming up Saturday. I mean, it is a banner day in the SEC, so much so that they're pushing one of these games, the one we're about to open with, all the way to a 9 o'clock Eastern time kickoff. That is where we begin, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. What about this Auburn at LSU game? You know, this time last week, I was telling you LSU's got to win at Mississippi State. They've got to win in order for that staff to basically salvage their futures and to salvage a season. And that sounded a little bit stark to the point, but I believed it. They got through that. Well, now the reward is they get to come home and they get to play Auburn. The line on this game is 3.5. That's what LSU is favored by. Auburn hasn't won in Baton Rouge since like the Clinton administration. It's been a long, long time. 3.5. What do we think? That's essentially home field. So what do we think about the fact that odds makers are telling you we kind of think they're even teams? Have at it. Take the home field and have at it. Look at the play splits in this game. At halftime, if the score's close, I want you to do something for me, and I want you to just take a look at the box score, and I want you to see how many plays have been run. Not necessarily time of possession. How many plays have been run? Normally they correlate. And keep in mind that en route to a win last week, LSU's defense was on the field, I think, 88 plays. They had the old double snowman there. Here's my concern for LSU as we dive into this game. My concern is they have not been able to run the ball. I don't think they'll magically find their running game against Derek Mason and this Auburn defense. And so there's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of variability here. If LSU, Max Johnson, if they're really in sync on third downs early on and they sustain some drives and put some points on the board, LSU will end up winning the game, and you can forget what I'm talking about. But if there's a lot of 3 and out, if there's some clunkiness to LSU's offense early on, here's the problem. The problem is they're more than capable of being every bit as physical and then some as UCLA was in week 1. And remember when those critical metrics started to shift, the amount of plays run on top of everything else, that's what I'm concerned with. I'm concerned that at halftime, even if the score is close, I'll check that box score and Auburn will have already run 44 offensive plays to LSU's 27. That's going to add up. In a 4-quarter game, it's going to add up. And in the fourth quarter, if Auburn can have this thing one possession either way, and they've tilted those metrics, that fourth quarter, I think, will be there for them. And with that in mind, ran it through the model. The model put this like right at a pick 'em. I think Auburn's going to end up winning this game. In the least likely year for them to win the game in Baton Rouge, I actually think this is the year Auburn's going to win. I don't have a ton of confidence in this. I have my hands on my hips as I'm making this pick, which, of course, I never do. But I'm going to take Auburn to win the game. I think last week's close call against Georgia State kind of grabbed the collar of that program a little bit. And there was a firing of a wide receiver coach this week. So it feels like they're in turmoil. Nothing solves that, and nothing extinguishes that quite like a win. This would be a really big one for that program. Let's talk about Florida. Florida's on the road. They are favored by somewhere between 8 and 9 points, depending on where you're looking right now. They're at Kentucky. This is a Saturday 5 o'clock Eastern time kickoff. I told you there's some weird kickoff windows this Saturday. So you're looking, if you look on the screen right now, if you're watching on YouTube, that number's at 7.5. So that's moved even since I started taking notes on this thing this morning. I told you a couple of times, and I'll tell you once more, I think what both of these teams were able to do last week has been very overlooked. I appreciate the fact that Florida got up off the deck in an emotional and physical letdown spot after they played Bama, and they ended up pulling away from Tennessee. That is not a bad thing. That's a very good thing. I don't care that it was close at the half because every football game we talk about is 4 quarters long. That is a feather in the cap of that coaching staff. That's something that in the past, maybe they wouldn't have been able to pull off. And then conversely, or not conversely, kind of on the same side of that coin, Kentucky, I think they won by 1 possession at South Carolina. And you may look at that and you may say, well, big deal. It is a big deal because they were -3 in turnovers. Kentucky on the road in conference, losing the turnover battle by 3 should mean they lost the game by double digits. If you figure every turnover is worth X number of points, we think somewhere between 5.5 and 6, they should have lost the game. And not only did they cover, they ended up winning the game. That's a big deal. And so now we move into this game that everyone's got circled, and you don't have to worry about it being off the radar. I'm way more confident in Florida, and the confidence grows week by week, not only because of what I just talked about, but also because Florida can do something this year that we have not been able to count on them doing. And that's have a really good offensive line show up and therefore a really good ground game show up. When you can do that, that travels. It goes with you. Doesn't matter if you're playing in Gainesville or on Neptune, or in this case, Lexington, Kentucky. That'll travel with you. That's very exciting because what that also does is it removes the wild swings and the ups and the downs and the ebbs and the flows. You get a lot more used to seeing one consistent product out of them. And so I think that's what we'll end up seeing Saturday. Now, having said that, they're taking Kentucky's best shot Saturday. Please don't misunderstand me. Kentucky will empty the chambers here. This is a Super Bowl type game for them. They're getting them at home. It's a big recruiting weekend for the Cats. But what I think this will end up feeling like is I think it'll feel like Florida's in control the whole game, but yet you'll look up in the second half and Kentucky will be right there. You will say probably to someone sitting next to you, you'll text your buddy, you'll say, man, it feels like Florida's dominating this game. Look at how many yards they have. Look how many plays they've run compared to Kentucky. Because what's going to happen is I think Florida's going to put together a few long drives to score. And I think Kentucky's just they're going to piddle around and then pop. The old piddle and pop, if you will, offense. If it hasn't been created already, it should. And they'll pop enough big plays on Florida to where they're answering. They're answering in chunk plays, but they're answering. In the end, though, I think Florida does outlast Kentucky. Now, I went with Kentucky in the points, anything over a touchdown, but I do like Florida to win the game. I think it'll be competitive, but I do like Florida to win the game. How about this one? This is one that's totally off the radar. What do you think about Texas A&M Saturday? And your answer right now is half likely to be, who are they playing? Exactly. No one's paying attention to Texas A&M right now. You saw them lose to Arkansas. You know they've got Bama coming up somewhere. That's next week. They play Mississippi State Saturday. We told you in July, this is the biggest ambush spot, perhaps on the entire SEC schedule this year. Texas A&M is favored by 7 at home against Mississippi State. So that's counting for home field. So we're talking about well under a touchdown spread between the two teams on a neutral. The total's in the mid-40s. One of the biggest ambush spots because you've got post-Arkansas, pre-Bama. You got Mississippi State coming in there. No one expects anything from them. They just lost to LSU. So it's season salvaging time for both teams. And I'm looking right now at what Texas A&M is as an offensive product. And the problem is when you can't stretch the field, when you can't sustain drives, when I cannot count on you to put some offense together, you don't blow anyone out, Mississippi State included. You're not going to blow anyone out here. And I'll tell you this too. If Mississippi State continues to limit the run to the degree that they have, they can win this game. I don't know if you guys would know or not, because not a lot of eyeballs are on this game. This would not be a shocking upset. We picked Louisiana Monroe last week plus 24. They beat Troy outright. That was pretty surprising. This would not be nearly as shocking as that. So here's what Mississippi State needs. They need to limit that run. They need to have A&M, 3.5, 3.75 yards per carry, somewhere in that range. And then they need to pop them a couple of times. Mississippi State needs to do to A&M what Arkansas did last week. Arkansas didn't have a bunch of sustained drives in their own right, but they popped them over the top a couple of times. Poor tackling in the secondary for A&M. If they're going to be lethargic, this is the spot to catch them being lethargic, they being Texas A&M. I went with A&M to win this game, but the line 7, I went with Mississippi State to cover. I think it's that close. I think it's going to be a one-possession game. So those are some more picks around the SEC. Remember, we took Bama to win. We took Bama to cover, controversially so. And we took Arkansas to cover and Georgia to win. This is a great Saturday in the SEC. You've got from noon until 9 Eastern time. You've got kickoffs happening about every 2 hours, and it's going to be really, really fun.